Hello, my name is Mindahi Bastida from the Otomi Toltec peoples from central Mexico. It's a great honor to be with J.J. Hurtak and Desiree Hurtak this uh, morning, this afternoon, and this night. I have been honored to call to other people to write about their experiences about ancestors. And this is the book that we have come together, Ancestors in the Sentence Common, and JJ and Desiree have been key in this book because they have also been in so many sacred sites around the world. As you know, we have been working with two teams, especially with the Eagle and the Condor Council members, and also with the team of Rico Paganini and Furtado Ngara and Pubin Mudley, among others. And JJ and Desiree have been also in the places that we have visited, especially in Egypt, in other places like in Azores, and recently we were also in Mount Shasta and in Kauai and many other places. So what we have put together is the divine remembrance of lineage, relations, and sacred sites. So this book really is the ancestral wisdom that we are putting together, because ancestors is not just the blood lineage, but it's also the entities, the deities that dwells in the sacred sites, but also the sacred landscape. And beyond that, ancestors are from the stars. You know, remember that our creation stories tells us that we came from the stars, from the Pleiades, and then the leading star, that's what we call now Venus, is always present in our lives. It's the most important star in our lives as a peoples. Then we came to Lemuria, that others call the Mu continent, as we call the Mu continent. And then we know that we have still until today, we have two very important manifestations or celebrations among the Otomi Toltec. And then we are very related to the ancestors through the celebration of the day or the days of the dead around November, beginning of November, ending of October. So today we have the beautiful time to be here with JJ and Desiree. And it's so amazing because they have witnessed directly how ancestors manifest. They manifest in sacred sites and elsewhere, because the connection is so important, and the intention that we put when we travel and we carry out presence and ceremony, and we put the offerings and the payments, the intention, then other possibilities open. So welcome, brothers, sisters, JJ and Desiree. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you, Mindahi. We are honored to be with you. We have, as you know, worked extensively around the world. We are honorary members and chiefs of the Xavante Nation in Brazil. I'm showing one picture of our work. In eras of Western civilization have overlooked the importance of the indigenous sacred areas. And many years ago, when I was doing my work in Mexico at Tulum and using sacred language, I'm speaking now of the historic language of the Hebrew, Aramaic, and the Egyptian, as well as the indigenous languages. A light event took place, as you can see here briefly, in the sacred area of Tulum, Mexico, which is noted for its ancient pyramids. While I was chanting and singing, a light force suddenly came down, and I felt a connection with the ancestral powers of Tulum. This is something that was amazing. A man taking a picture of his wife, I'm pointing to with my finger at the lower part of the picture, was able to capture in a few seconds this energy field that came around my body and actually knocked the translator off his position on the platform where we were doing the celebration. So we know there are energy fields that are connected with the sacred areas that now must be respected and re-energized if we're going to see our way through this planetary change with minimal difficulty.
Right. And Mindahi, I know some of your work, a lot of people looking at the book Ancestors think, especially when the Native Americans talk about it, my grandmother, my grandfather, but you've taken it a higher step, which I think that's valid. The grandfather, grandmother, they're always influencing us, and that's important as well. But in the sacred areas, it's also the planetary grandmothers and grandfathers, those that have been with us for, we'll say 6,000, we'll even say 12,000, 36,000 years watching this planet. And so that's really, really important to realize that this planet has been watched and cared for many, many generations. And that's one of the reasons that in 2012, while we did the day after 2012, we were down at the Cancun Convention Center with 1,500 people, because we knew there was too many ancestors really watching this planet to have it here today, gone tomorrow, and we needed a lot more. But we're in a time of change right now, and that's why this information is so important to come out. And we've worked together with you in many places like Sedona, Arizona,
as well as South Africa, where we worked with Credo Mutwa and produced a film back in the 80s called Voice of Africa, the unseen aspect of spiritual music and spiritual teaching that brings people together. And also with you in Egypt. I may show this picture to our audience. It's a little bit difficult to see with the right perspective. However, you see the golden light inside the ascending chamber, or the Grand Gallery as it's also called, in Giza, Egypt. The Great Pyramid was built with a certain musical acoustical property. And when we sing and use sacred language, suddenly the sacred area begins to change its vibration, light up momentarily, as we see here. The word pyramid means fire in the middle. So here we see a standing column or way of light energy that was momentarily produced while we were singing together in celebration of the ancient unity with our ancestors from various parts of the Near East. And so your work and our work connect with all of the tribal traditions that wish a peaceful transition with the cosmic cultures.
And I just want to add that the temples that we talk about, and they can be from Egypt to the Mayan culture or wherever around the world, they were there for the ancestors and for those who live in the higher realms to come and connect with us. And we believe when you go there, you do sacred ceremony and you do your prayers and meditations, especially in the indigenous language that's there, these beings literally start to materialize.
So we honor your work with the Toltecs. We honor your leadership. We honor very much the work that we're doing in all of the sacred areas around the world, including the Azores in the north, because these areas are part of what we believe to be an ancient grid or a sacred geometry of brotherhood and sisterhood that is now being energized.
Yes, so amazing what you are sharing with us. Those are, sometimes people yes, they just hear, but these pictures show exactly how energy works. So what would you suggest for, let's say, common people, ordinary people to get connected to the ancestors and to the higher ancestors?
I will begin by saying people need to visualize their spiritual family as something that is present in a higher vibration, like a musical keyboard. As we go higher and higher into the musical notes, our ears, our eyes, our heart begins to open with a higher sense of vibratory attunement. And I feel that music and sacred language work together to open our body as a musical instrument in harmony to be with our spiritual family, regardless if we think it's in the Pleiades, in Orion. These are areas that we have had contact with, like you, whether someplace else. The point is that we are a family of music and devotion, and we must fuel this by being more positive with the vibrations, what scientists call acoustical physics of consciousness. We must raise our consciousness in daily celebration.
Right. And so just know that we're not alone. And no one is alone, actually, even if you live by yourself. That's what I was saying, even during the COVID times. Basically, there's so much, people say, well, that was, I felt my mother telling me something. And that can be your ancestor. But you can also go a little higher than that and say, well, I felt, the presence of the divine instructing me or helping me along the way or guiding me. And that's what's so important. And even also maybe those who had been part of your spiritual tradition, if you're Catholic, for example, you feel the presence of the angels who are watching over you.
Or if you're Mescalero Apache, you feel the vibrations.
These are all valid. And, we cut ourselves off to say, oh, those things don't exist. They don't happen. That's just, old mythology. But it's not. And I think more and more the curtain between our reality and the next realms are starting to get thinner and thinner. I think people are starting to tune in to understanding and to feeling. And Dr. Hurtak also mentioned, the sacred areas, because that's part of our function here tonight, to talk about these sacred areas that we wrote about in a small section of your book there. But, there is this grid structure around the planet. We believe the Great Pyramid is part of that, but we also believe many of the pyramids in Mexico are part of that, but also in Hawaii. There's also the heiaus, that's part of that, and all the way into the Far East, and India, the stupas. So this is all part of a larger network, and those networks literally align us to the stars. And that was part of the purpose of any of the temples, was to connect us back to the higher regions of that we forgot that existed, and we can invite them now into our lives and listen to them, because I believe that's the way of the future. We have to know and have to listen.
I'm showing a picture of the cosmograms or cosmic pictures we teach with all people that elevates the mind to see the coming of the La Paloma, the dove, the symbol of peace throughout the world cultures.
Yes.
And we are at a time we recognize as the gathering of the tribes, where people can come together if they take the higher path of compassion and unconditional love. And so that's part two. Besides the vibration, there must be a living and a loving connection that overcomes the negative separations that unfortunately the media likes to play upon. And we have to be wise students in recognizing we are part of a much greater family, a greater civilization of the cosmic cultures, or what your traditions and the indigenous of North and South America called the Star Nations. The Star Nations are coming back, and this is why we're having these amazing signs. Again, another picture of a dove that manifested over one of the pyramids in Mexico while we were praying. So we have authentic scientific documentation, musical documentation, photographic documentation that a big change is coming that we must not prepare for, not in fear, but in celebration.
And we went into the pyramids. We did actually research that's been published. We went into the pyramids of Palenque underneath the ground. We went into the pyramids of Chichen Itza, the main one, and underneath the ground, and we did sound testing to get the resonant frequencies. And we believe some of those frequencies help us. So sound, chanting, and even, just praying verbally and connecting yourself. Intention, many people are talking about now, that intention really transforms the ability to reach out. You have to say you want to help humanity. You also have, and with your heart, don't just say it logically. And then you also have to realize that you can be a higher divine vessel for helping humanity. And that's what the ancestors, whether you look at your own in-laws, so to speak, on the other side, or the divine guidance that this planet's always had. That is what they want us to do. They want us to help humanity.
And Mindahi, you speak of the 13 areas. This is so important.
And help the animals and the plants. I want to say that too. We were given even in the Bible, given the right to name the given the right to name the animals. And that's because that is part of our work, to help animals, to help plants, to help all of this. And, we've neglected it, as you well know.
Yes, I want to ask you about some guidance for us and for people in general, for the world. How can we honor ancestors? How can we really direct that intention, that love that we have for life and for transcendence.
Well, first of all, we must show the big picture that there are these sacred areas that must be connected together. These are the 13 areas I just talked about
And that you've traveled around the last few
that
years.
we're not
we know.
visiting and activating.
Yes.
Secondly, we must show devotion and possibly get local authorities to set these areas aside for continuous use in the celebration of respect for the past, but also preparation for the future. In this way, we become the temple of understanding. We bring all temples together because we are the capstone. We are the missing part of the greater temple that unites all of these others. The 13 areas you speak of is also part of the Coptic teaching of mystical Christianity in Egypt, that there are 13 levels of the heavens, and the 13th requires the synthesis of all of them together. So it's teaching universality, it's teaching pluralism, it's teaching sacred respect for everyone who takes the higher path and avoids violence and separation.
I'll leave it at that, but also just they want us to make this a better world, give us a space for soul advancement. I believe that's part of why we're here. So sometimes challenges come to people, and we really need to recognize that as a challenge and to make the decision to go with helping humanity and not helping ourselves. So going into these temples, these sacred areas, really helps to align us. And I have to say, for some people who maybe can't travel anymore or don't feel like traveling, we can still do that through the power of the mind. It's always better to be there, to feel that energy, but put yourself there, see yourself sitting within the pyramid, the Great Pyramid of Egypt, or sitting within a temple somewhere in the world that you admire, and you can be there. You can receive some of that energy.
Excellent. So anything else you want to add?
Well, I'd like to say, in addition, our book called Mind Dynamics in Space and Time with Elizabeth Rauscher from Stanford Research Institute a few years ago shows the power of the mind to look in any direction and to look beyond limitation for distant communication, distant healing, remote vision. All of these higher powers of consciousness, we will call super consciousness, are now being scientifically validated by our friends at the University of California and also Stanford University. And we feel honored to work with you and to work with so many groups throughout the world who know that the new science of consciousness is on our side. The new vibrations of spirituality is uniting the hearts of people throughout the world. And we must be very positive and not give in to negativity, or should we say, the separation of East, West, North, and South. This is so important, as you well know, from your traditions. The Toltec play a very amazing role in bringing together the appreciation of the ancestral spirit in a very important way. And so we will work with you side by side in any circumstance.
And I just want to say, we talk about the sacred areas in our chapter as well as tonight, but it's important to realize as well that it's not just the physical temple itself. They're in energy parts or grid points of the planet. And that creates a type of vortex energy that's not just on the planet. And people, I know I grew up near the Bermuda Triangle, and there's many places like that are these energy points. But Dr. Hurtak, in his original book, The Keys of Enoch, talks about how they're aligned. And Orion, the Pleiades, and you were mentioning earlier, even Venus, a place of love and energy, positive energy. These are all part of the alignments that these temples are positioned. They're not random positions. In fact, just to say one thing, there was a young Canadian boy, about 15 years old. He copied very similar to something that Dr. Jack published in 73, that there's a grid point in the Yucatan of all the pyramids. And there's a lot of pyramids in the Yucatan. Wow. There's actually 100 pyramids or so, even in Egypt, people don't realize. And he aligned them, the pyramids in the Yucatan, to the pyramids, or to the positions of the star points in the heavens.
That's
and he
right.
did this with, are you familiar with this?
Yes, I'm familiar with that. Yes.
And he even found one place that was missing. And when they looked at it through their, we'll say Earth observation satellites, they found that it was a type of ruin. So yeah, this is our thing. He changed it a little bit. We put Chichen Itza, he put Koba, but he was 15 years old and proved this right, that these pyramids of the Yucatan are all aligned to the stars. That's why they were there.
And that's why we've had these experiences.
Wow.
The La Paloma, because we've been praying for unity. We've been praying that the people of Mother Earth become more futuristic and understand we're all connected with our brothers and sisters, our ancestors in the higher worlds. And the illusion of death and separation, of course, is part of the misuse of scientific measurement. Consciousness goes on. The vibrations of the great masters go on. We feel it in the pyramids when they're energized, in the ancient temples of Yucatan and Egypt and Africa. We are so fortunate to work together at this time as the avant-garde for a whole new anthropology, a whole new book of evolutionary perspectives. And your book on the ancestors is so important. It is the lifeblood of who we are, who we have come from, and who we will mature to be if we take the path of divine love and service for all humanity.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. We are becoming ancestors, and we will be ancestors in the future. So thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity to talk and share and interchange these beautiful moments. And please,
yes, we will announce this wonderful book wherever we go.
Thank you so much.
We thank Ariel. We thank all of those who have brought us together for this amazing conversation.
Thank you, and be blessed. Hello, my name is Mindahi Bastida from the Otomi Toltecs peoples from central Mexico. And it's my great pleasure to be here today talking with my beloved friend and colleague, Dr. Kurt Johnson. And today we are going to talk about my book, Ancestors. And well, Dr. Kurt Johnson has been a key collaborator in this. So this is about the Common Sentence series. And I like to bring to the audience, Dr. Kurt Johnson, please.
Yeah, Mindahi, thank you. And such a pleasure to be here. And before I revert back to you to ask you to talk about ancestors and why they're so important, this whole phenomenon, there's no doubt that one of the most important things happening globally today in a part of our global transformation and evolution is more and more people having this deep access to experiences downloading from the subtle realms. And that's such an important part of this deeper understanding that we'll need to have at a planetary level to build out this world that can work for all. So Mindahi, back to you then to talk about this entire phenomena, ancestors, the subtle realms, you, your book, and turn it back to you. Thanks so much.
Thank you. It's been a journey about ancestors and how we recall this remembrance of lineage, and in relationship also to the sacred sites, because all of us, we have this connection. Thanks to our ancestors, we are here. Let's not forget about that. They are guiding us, they are watching us, they are feeling us. So it's in our tradition when we say our ancestors are here, it's because when we die, we become soil, we become oil, we become the so-called now fossil fuels. If we are not respecting what life is, then we are not respecting ourselves. We are not respecting the future generations to come. So that's the reason ancestors is not just talking about blood lineage, but it's talking about entities, deities, you know, the mountains, the rivers, Mother Sea, Father Sky, because they were before us, and they are the ones who are living in ourselves. They are the ones who are giving life to ourselves. So, what do you? What is your wisdom about ancestors and how they come to the subtle realms? I know that you have big experience about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's so important here is that in this time, you know, what you just mentioned, these energies, deities, presences, download into our consciousness in very, very specific ways. I think everyone knows the word numinous. When you have an experience, it's so deep, it propels you deeper than anything else. And there's not only a message, but there's something that it asks you to do. So for instance, even when we look at Mindahi's entire life and other workers like him, they've been directed by these subtle realms in very specific ways with regard to what their work is, how to carry it out, where and with who. And this is really something that's underpinning the whole global transformation today. Just one little comment I'll make on that is that, that we're really looking today for this harmony of interfaith, interspirituality, global harmony, this oneness of a global civilization. And so there's a tendency we know from neuroscience that when people have this deep vertical experience, they'll also tend to interpret it across the line of their horizontal experience from their own tradition. And that's actually fine. But the awareness that we have to have is that when we have these deep experiences that are so specific, that we actually see them in the universal way that is serving the larger picture and not fall into the trap of just our part of the story, that our story may be more important than someone else's story, and so on, because we're working toward this world that works for all and this global harmony. So we don't want to introduce division when it comes to our explanations or our claims about these stories. So maybe, Mindahi, what you can do is tell about how these experiences have propelled your own life and mission, where you're so known all around the world for being a leader of sacred sites and of indigenous peoples. And I know you've based that on very clear direction.
Yes. For the beginning, I must say that I come from a lineage of my grandmother, that she was hit by the light. And then, we come from traditional healers and healers. So that's very important because it's another way of connecting with mystery. And also in this material world, how we act in such a way that we are guided by our ancestors, and how we can bring harmony and peace and regain collective dignity as human beings in from other relatives. So that's why we honor so much sacred sites, because those sacred sites are the places where the energy is being, manifested and strong. It's like the acupuncture points of Mother Earth. So it's where, the entities and the deities dwells. And they are the ones who are bringing this energy that we need for this life. So in my personal experience, I can say that I have experienced this touch with our ancestors. Whenever I have a big problem, I call and I pray to them, because they are the ones who can guide me, and they can also manifest during their lifetime. So that's why we honor so much the ancestors. Even in general, I come from Mesoamerica, from Mexico, and we have a special fiesta, special ritual for the Day of the Dead, and we put together offerings, we put together, fruits, food, beverages that our ancestors used to like. But it's not just to the human ancestors, it's also to the ones who were before. So that's very meaningful, because in that case, some animals like the butterflies, they are manifested through the souls of our ancestors. So that's the reason we have that deep connection in another level, in another way of dealing with, living with these entities. So
yeah, absolutely. And one of the ways that people can think about this who are watching is think of the entire Earth and the entire cosmos really as a super organism, interconnected and all involved, each part with each other, from the highest to the lowest. And so when Mindahi talks about, just like our body is made up of acupuncture points and energy meridians and everything has to work together. Actually, the entire realm of consciousness, the subtle realms, the Akashic field, the planet itself as Gaia, the entire cosmos is really in that sense a superorganism. And a part of what we're starting to understand today as a species is this inherent deep connection with the entire cosmos at that level. That's how we were created. That's how all of this information was enfolded. And so people who are doing the kind of work that Mindahi is doing and have these abilities to hear into those realms and sense into those realms, they can really be deeply and specifically directed toward the work that's needed right now at this time. So Mindahi, tell us a bit about the work you're doing with sacred sites and why that healing and that re-energizing is so important.
Yes, we have been going to the most affected sacred sites, but also the most important sacred sites around the world. We have been in Mount Fuji, Mount Etna, Mount Blanca in the Four Corners. You know, Mount Fuji is in Japan, Mount Etna is in Italy. And we can see how they are connected in the spiritual, not just in the material world, but in the spiritual world. Because the entities who live there and people have forgotten how to reciprocate. They have forgotten the rituals and the ceremonies. So that's the reason our presence is very important. And we need to ask the locals to remember that connection. Because sometimes we move from one place to another place and we don't even ask permission. We have to ask permission to enter this other space, because around the sacred landscape, there are specific sacred sites. And we know that Mother Earth is suffering now because of climate crisis, climate change, whatever it's called. It's because of the misbehavior, because we have forgotten how to live with Mother Earth, not from. So that's different. And the work we are doing around sacred sites is to for the healing and balancing on Mother Earth. The healing is so important because we are going there to put some prayers, offerings, and to the deities and to the entities that are there and have been forgotten. So that's the work we are doing, reconnection. Remember.
Yeah, absolutely. And so again, what people need to remember to understand this is that this is an experience in consciousness, an experience of individual humans in consciousness. And think of like when you decide that it really heals you and makes you feel connected when you visit the grave of a beloved. Why would you do that? Well, you go there because you're in that proximity in your consciousness with the entire realm of what your connection and experience has been with that person. So that becomes real. And the message that you go away with, that you feel comforted, that you feel healed, is real to you. And that's what's really happening at a global level when people like Mindahi and the other ceremonialists are going in and communicating with these deep, deep places that have so many layers of this consciousness. So one thing I wanted to point out, and it's actually in the book in a number of places, is that because there's a tendency for modern people to think that some of these experiences that Mindahi is talking about aren't real, what's really important is that when you see the fruits of what's being done by the third-party validation, by witnesses and others, of the fruits of that work, it's one thing to make a statement and to say, we need to do this, we need to do this, and this is going to happen. But when that actually does unfold, it's a testimony to this deep connection that Mindahi is talking about, and that these experiences are not only real, but they're absolutely necessary in how our species becomes deeply intertwined now with the whole cosmos, and not just experiencing separation and isolation.
That's right. And, every time I talk about these issues with other people, they are remembering sometimes, and they are afraid sometimes to share these experiences. But I think this is the time now to come together and really help each other. So I like to know your own experiences, your experience because you are one of the the authors here in the beautiful book of Ancestors. Please tell us what is your experience, Kurt, and how we can learn from that experience.
Yeah, well, what I'll say about that, and it's very typical of many of the other chapters in the book, it goes back to that word numinous, that you have an experience in consciousness, and there's not only a message there, but there's an instruction of an action to take, something to do. And then you actually know the validity of that action when that actually unfolds in a way that validates that this was something that was important for service, for knowledge, whatever the case may be. And my own chapter, and also Dr. Julie Kroll's chapter, she's a psychologist in the book, we're giving very clear examples that were undeniable about these kinds of intervention from the deeper consciousness world. And then they're unfolding in reality as validated, not only like in my case, by other leaders in the spiritual community within my chapter, but that, of course, is what's propelling the success of your entire work. So what I'd like to ask you, Mindahi, to kind of wrap us up here if we need to, tell us about how you're seeing your future and your calling with all of the sacred sites around the world, and where that's really leading to a larger global healing, a larger global deeper wisdom, and all of those aspects that First Peoples, Indigenous peoples have access to those knowledges that many of us have just forgotten.
Yes, ancestral wisdom is key for our survival as human species. And we know that we need to go to those places to mend the, what is being desecrated. And we need to raise awareness, consciousness about what we are doing in our lives with nature and the sacred. So we need another way, another narrative, but not just another narrative, but another kind of action. We have to put intention for the sacred, how we relate each other. And that's why it's so important to protect sacred sites. And not just to protect them, but also to work with them, because the entities and the deities that dwells there, they are doing their work, but they also need a spiritual reciprocity. That's why the work we are doing is so important, because ancestors are not just the past. Ancestors is the present, ancestors is the future.
Right, so following on that, speaking to people who are listening to us, and obviously maybe having experiences like this or in their own future deeper experiences, what is the advice that you would give them about how they would approach those experiences in their own life?
Yes, the advice is just to reconnect, to be aware that we are not alone, and we have never been alone, and we won't. So it's just the reconnection with the sacredness. Just to take some moments during the day, at dusk, at the sunrise, at noon, just to take some minutes and stop whatever you are doing and just connect, breathe, and be aware that you are alive. But we are not here forever. We are just for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. To deeply listen. And as you give yourself permission for that deep listening, to see really how that unfolds in super positive ways in your own life, because then you're going to understand and feel this direction from those subtle realms. And that's an absolute gift to anybody's life. So, Mindahi, I just wanted to mention there's an entire issue of our free magazine, which people can find at issuu.com/lightonlight, and simply look at the cover. There's a picture of Mindahi on the cover, and the title is Sacred Sites and Spirituality in Nature. The reason I mention it, there's an entire section on how Mindahi visions this work at a global level and the various sacred sites they've visited and what they've done there. So Mindahi, tell us again, just to send people on their way with a new experience and a deep looking forward to how this can manifest for them.
Yes.
How you see this whole future.
Yes, thank you for that. And I see that we can make it. We can do it together. There's no other way. We have to go from competition to collaboration, from the me to the we. And that's key. because, as you know, we are passing these difficult times all together. We are in a cleansing time, but we must learn from each other. We are not alone. We have our ancestors to guide us. And that connection is so important because we came here for a purpose. And the purpose is for the care of life and transcendence. So thank you so much, Kurt, for this beautiful conversation. And it's always a great honor to be with you, learning from you, and your wisdom is great. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks from all of us to you, Mindahi. I know everybody at a global level looks at you as a very important leader for these times, and I know that that's going to continue unfold. So not only you, but your entire family that are so deeply involved in this transformative work. So just a heartfelt, gigantic hug from everyone in the world for the work that you're doing.
Thank you.